we moved up here in 1996. And at that time, I was only about 5 years old, and the original house was here on the property, and a little barn, and that was it. So it really, yeah, my folks developed the whole property, planted the vines, they built the winery, and I know sometimes too, it's kind of like, oh, somebody built it, but they had a general contractor and everybody lined out to do the work. My dad and two other guys, they framed the whole building themselves and did everything. So it definitely hit home, for all of us. But I mean, for my folks, it was really a tough time. So,
and
but
you and your dad actually were out there helping fight the fire, as I understand it.
That's right. Yeah. So the fire started on Spring Mountain on a Sunday night, right at about dinner time. And my mom and my sister, who was evacuated from Howell Mountain, which is across the way, they were all up here. And then once the fire jumped onto Spring Mountain, I got a phone call from a firefighter friend who basically said, "Hey, Matt, if you or any of the family are on Spring Mountain, get out now. Don't pack, just leave." He said, it's that bad, just leave. And so I called them, and sure enough, called my folks. Luckily, they picked up, and my mom and my sister and my niece's little friend, they all drove down the hill. And by the time they got to the bottom of the hill, there was flames on both sides of the road. And by the time I was able to try and get up the hill, firefighters were coming down off of the hill saying, "Don't even go there. It's we're blown off the mountain. Flames 150 feet tall," and that's not even exaggerating. But my dad, he had stayed up here. So that first night, he had stayed up here by himself and kind of prepared. And so it didn't hit our property on that first rush of fire. What it ended up hitting was the following Monday morning, when it came up from kind of the Calistoga side. So it came up through Bothay State Park. And as it came up the hill, I mean, if you think about the mountain going up like this and you get to the top, we're like right here. So it wasn't a really windy fire, but it was a topography driven fire. So it just ripped right up the hill and took our winery, took our neighbor's winery, and it would have taken another winery for sure if they're a little bit further set back and they had vines planted on the fire side. So they lost a lot of vines, but it stopped the fire before it was able to reach any of the structures. So definitely happened fast. There was, we thought we were pretty well prepared. Sprinklers on the roof, external sprinklers going, everything wetted down, 60-foot setback from, where the fire line would have been, and just didn't work.
It was too intense.
Yeah. So, and we had left for like 1 hour to go check in with my wife and my mom, and, just to kind of get our bases again. And when we came back up, that's when it was on fire. And then other fires were starting around the area as well. So it was bad, but in the wake of that, we were able to get it cleaned up really quick. I remember when we're sitting there looking at more or less the rubble of where the fire burned the winery down, my dad said, "You know what? Now," he says, "my goal is for us to be the first winery rebuilt." And that always kind of stuck with me because, that I could just tell that even though he was broken down, we were all broken down, there was that drive that was like, all right, we're gonna get right back to it. So.
Well, I love the blog that you have on your website where it shows the little videos of the progression of the new tasting room that you're building. I like the way you do little short clips and you can kind of see that things are moving along. So how is that coming?
Thank you. Yeah, it's been fun to actually see stuff happening. It's been, a long road just to get to where we can start building. And it's been nice to be able to document it. And we have so many customers and friends that are like more or less on the edge of their seat, wanting to know any information that we have on kind of the status of where we're at. And so it's been nice to put those updates up there and kind of document the construction as it's been going on. But luckily, my dad, before the wine industry, was in building and construction for about 25 or 30 years. And so he kind of just went right back into construction mode and just started rebuilding. So it's going pretty well. And he got the contractors together as far as framing contractors and started lining some stuff out. We started getting everything kind of prepped for them and just got straight to work. So it was interesting, actually. The original engineering firm and the original architectural firm that helped get everything dialed in for the winery in the beginning, they jumped back in to help us kind of expedite the process and getting it going again, given that they had all the historical records of what they did in the past. So it was that helped out a lot. And currently we're all framed up and ready to keep moving forward. We're just running into some issues with the county right now, as far as getting a finalized permit to proceed construction.
So the $65 million question is when do you think the tasting room will be open?
So we get that question a lot, and it's kind of a catch-22, because in all reality, if we got the green light tomorrow to continue to build, I mean, we could probably be complete in 3 months. However, going through the bureaucracy of the county and everything, it's really been holding us up. We've been kind of in a holding pattern now for about a month. And so and they're trying to help, they're trying to expedite things, but they're just so impacted by every situation going on right now, given the fires, not just the fires from 2020, but 2017 and, being understaffed. So to answer your question, I would hope that in like a year that we would be fully open. However, this spring, actually in May 1st, we're going to start bringing customers back. So part of our patio we're very fortunate, was not damaged at all. So we had this huge area out on the side of the building that's all concrete patio, bocce court, kind of picnic area. All of that's still fine. So in May, we're going to start bringing back customers on kind of a limited basis. So that'll be really exciting to see friendly faces up here again.
I know you wear a lot of hats at the winery. Besides posting on your website and doing virtual tastings, you're the assistant winemaker and the vineyard manager?
I guess by title, yes. I'm general manager and assistant winemaker. So yeah, there's so many different hats to wear. It is interesting, given that a lot of time I'm working on wines, and then other times, obviously not right now with the winery situation, but other times doing tastings, working on marketing, and then a large part of what I do is also in the vineyard. So we have 16 to 17 acres of vines on the property, and so we manage that all in house. We have a farming company that helps us with actually implementing and getting labor crews up here to help us. But as far as all the management, irrigation, everything from a viticulture standpoint, we take care of it up here. So it's that's a huge undertaking in itself, but it really gives us the ability to control every portion of the business, from the vine all the way to when you put that bottle on the table and present the wines. That's what really hits home for me, is walking out in the vineyard, to then going out to an event or maybe at a tasting at the tasting room and actually pouring that bottle of wine and presenting it and having it put a smile on somebody's face.
So in addition to rebuilding, your dad, Steve Sherwin, would be the main winemaker there?
Yeah, so he's the main winemaker. Yeah. So we work hand in hand. It's truly a family operation. In the beginning, when they moved up here, or when my family moved up here, my dad coming from the construction background, he didn't know much about wine, and definitely not on the winemaking end. So after they planted the vineyard and decided to make a little bit of wine, he had to find somebody to kind of show him the ropes. So he found a winemaker here in town who had, actually, it's kind of a funny story, who was developing a vineyard of his own, but he didn't have any equipment and he had never planted a vineyard before. He had just done everything on the winemaking side. And my dad had just finished developing our whole property. We had tractors, all the implements, everything that you needed to develop a vineyard. And so they got to talking and they thought, well, hey, let's just do a trade. If you help me develop my vineyard and kind of show me the ropes there, then I'll give you a hand on the winemaking end and teach you how to make wine. So that's kind of how the whole wine portion of our business started, and then the wine turned out to be pretty good. So we had used various consultants throughout the years to kind of come up with a full-on program, and also for blending, it's always good to have other winemakers in the room and so that you don't have necessarily a house palate, and get together and finalize the blends and pick a direction for your winemaking. And in 2014, when I came back in and started working more with wines and stuff, my dad thought, you know what, let's just do it, you and I now. And so I said, well, absolutely, that'd be great. And started making all the wines, just him and I.
When you were talking about the situation that your father was in with the vineyard, where he had the property and the grapes, but he made some type of arrangement with someone who knew how to make the wine. I've heard from two different people in the last month who were like on the other side of that equation, that did not have the property or the grapes, but that knew how to make wine. Is that a common situation in your area?
It can be. I guess it goes both ways. Yeah. I mean, it's funny that you say that, because in the wine industry, a lot of times we barter. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of bartering going on, like, trading wine, or, hey, you help somebody out, the neighbors out, and you don't ask for payment, but next thing you know, a case of wine, they bring it over to the house, that kind of thing. And so I have heard of the trades going on quite often, as far as, hey, I have some grapes, I'll give you some fruit if you teach me how to make wine. That's what I see.
Steve Sherwin invented the Gravity Flow Winery to be gentle with grapes, not extract unwanted tannins. Can you tell us about Gravity Flow Winery? What does that mean?
When processing your grapes, typically you will bring in the fruit, put it through a destemmer, depending on your style of winemaking, destem the fruit, sort the fruit, and then have to pump it or take it with some sort of implement, lift it, and then dump it into the tank for fermentation. The way that my dad had developed the winery is he made it to where our crush pad was at ground level, and then our cellar was more or less below ground level. And so all of our tanks are down below, and the neck of the tanks actually poke through the floor in our crush pad, what we call our crush pad area, on the side of the building. And so when we are processing the fruit goes into the destemmer, and then it falls onto a shaker table, which kind of spreads out the fruit so it doesn't come out in clumps. And then it falls onto our sorting table, which is like a 30-foot long, at that point was a 30-foot long conveyor belt, where then we would have anywhere from 6 to 10 people sitting there picking out anything that is not a perfectly ripe berry. And then as it makes it to the end of the conveyor belt, it just drops right into the tank. And then the tanks were also elevated below the surface so that once the wine was done fermenting, we could roll the barrels underneath and just open the valve. And of course, we'd have a hose and gravity fill the barrels. And so everything is from, gravity from the top down. And then later on, when we need to rack the barrels or do anything like that, we just take the barrels up to the top, gravity flow into the tanks, wash out the barrels, bring the barrels back down below, and empty them into the barrels again. So it's a pretty cool system. It's kind of old school in the sense of back before pumps were invented and crazy implements. That is the way they had to do it. And so he kind of wanted to repurpose that, but with more of a high tech influence too.
And that's pretty ingenious that he brought back that old style of processing the wine like that. I think that worked out pretty good for him. Yeah, it really did. And for me, growing up in the winery, I didn't really know any different. So I just thought it was how it's done. And then having other winemakers come over, or me going to other wineries, the winemakers that come over here, I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. Like, we've never, made wine in that fashion. And they're like, gosh, that'd be great, where they had never really seen it done in that style. But yeah, it's a really, really a cool system. What was it like growing up on Spring Mountain? So growing up on Spring Mountain, definitely a small community up here. Everybody knows each other well. Everybody kind of looks out for each other. And I loved growing up here. I say that it's remote. We're only, 15-minute drive to St. Helena, but it's pretty windy and it's removed up here. And so it was always, there wasn't really many people to hang out with. So here I am, 5, 6 years old, and my sisters, I have 2 older sisters that one is about 10 years older and the other one's 5 years older than me. And so they were out doing their thing. They didn't want to hang out with me. I'm the only boy. And so I was always hanging out with my dad. And my dad was always working, whether it was developing the vineyard or working in the cellar. And so I was always tagging along with him. And so growing up here really kind of tied my roots to this property and winemaking and viticulture in general. I'd say it really started at an early age for me. There was never really a time that I thought, I'm not going to come back here eventually and work at the winery. Of course, I've gone out and worked other jobs just to kind of get off the mountain a little bit. But I always knew deep down that I would come back, and every year I feel like that went by when I was younger, and then even now, I just feel like you get more and more kind of ingrained and deeper rooted to our property and the winery up here in general. I know we should probably talk about what you're so famous for, is the flag on the bottle. That was just a great story. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Absolutely, yeah. So we're now actually known as the home of the Patriotic pour. So and that's mainly because of our commemorative Etched American Flag Series bottle. It really is based off the fact that, we're the only producer of alcohol in the United States that is permitted to place the American flag on a bottle of alcohol. And that happened right after September 11th. There was an auction over in Italy, and the Italians wanted to host this auction for the families of the Windows on the World restaurant. So up at the top of the World Trade Center. They had a total loss up there. And as they were
putting together this auction, they thought, well, what better than to have a wine auction? The Windows on the World restaurant had the largest wine list in the country, and I think the world. They had the largest wine list, and so they thought, well, let's have a wine auction. And as they started getting more creative with it, they thought, well, let's get 50 Italian wineries and let's get 50 Napa Valley wineries, and we'll have them donate large format bottles, and we'll pair them together and do paired lots, kind of as the two countries come together. And so they asked my folks to participate, and they said, well, absolutely. I mean, there's no way that we wouldn't. I mean, let's just tell us what we need to do. So they said, all right, you need to donate a 3-liter bottle and send it on over. And so a few days went by, and my folks are thinking, we can't just send over our regular label. At that time, they had our regular paper estate label, and they thought, we need to be patriotic right now. So they started thinking about it, and they thought, well, what if we were to etch like an American flag of some sort on the bottle and send it over there as like a patriotic series or a patriotic bottle? And so they worked with a gal in town who does all hand custom etching, and they came up with our American flag bottle, and they sent it over to the auction, and it was the top lot of the whole auction. And so they were extremely excited about that, and they thought, well, let's keep producing these, and we'll give a portion of the proceeds to the 9/11 Foundation, and we'll just keep it going. And so they started just doing it, and not really thinking about how alcohol labels need to be approved by the Treasury Department and government warnings and so on and so forth. And because they thought, hey, it's for a good cause. I mean, you see the American flag on everything. Why not a wine bottle? And so let's say a month or two goes by, and my mom goes, Steve, you should probably look into this and make sure that it's exactly like street legal to do this. And he thought, you see the flag on everything. It's on hats, shirts. I mean, what could go wrong? And so then they started thinking a little bit more, and they thought, okay, well, let's call it the Wine Institute, and we'll see what they have to say. They work as kind of like a liaison between wineries and pretty much any government agency, interstate commerce, taxes on alcohol, things like that. And so they called up the Wine Institute and told them about what they were thinking about doing. And they said, oh yeah, no, that's illegal. You can't put the American flag or any government seal on a bottle of alcohol, period. And so they thought, okay, well, I guess now we could potentially have some issues here. And so they thought, well, there has to be some sort of gray area. And they called up the Wine Institute again, and turns out no gray area or anything. But my dad got a hold of the president of the Wine Institute. And he said, you know what? This is not going to happen, but I love the idea. He said, if you can send me a prototype bottle back here to Washington, D.C., where they're headquartered, he said, I'll personally walk it across the street to the Treasury Department and take it up to the TTB office and see what they have to say. And so my folks sent over the bottle. He walked it across the street, and my folks got a phone call about 2 weeks later that they said, I can't believe it, but they stamped it approved over the desk. And it states that we're the only alcohol, exempt from article so-and-so. And this does not set a precedence for any further exemptions or approvals. And so we've been making them ever since. We make them in all sizes from 750 milliliter up to 6 liter bottles. And we donate about half of our production every year to mainly wounded veterans and their families now that after the 9/11 Foundation closed down, we had to kind of shift focus. And at that point, the war on terrorism was in full force. And so we've been supporting wounded veterans ever since.
So sales of that bottle, that line that you have, it must be pretty good on your website.
Yeah, it does. It does really well, and it's great because the bottles that we sell, I would say probably a third of them are then donated to like our customers' local charity organizations, and so it's really been a great way for us to be able to give back, number one, but number two, be able to give back doing what we love and being able to use a product that we produce ourselves.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about the wines that you sent us?
Sure. Yeah, that'd be great. So we sent you back they're basically our staple wines. On what I'm looking at right now on the far left in the funky bottle. That's our Cellar Scraps. Our Cellar Scraps is our fun blend of the bunch. It's a non-varietal, non-vintage red blend. So we created this about 15 or 16 years ago now, actually 15 going on 16. And we basically take all of our leftovers from our blends and blend it into what we call Cellar Scraps. And it's kind of a fun wine. So being non-vintage, there's typically 2 different vintages in each edition. So the number on the bottle there isn't designating the vintage itself, but just what edition of the blend we have produced. So we only make one a year, and typically it's about 70 or so percent Cabernet Sauvignon, because that's what we produce up here mainly. But we do blend in some Merlot, some Cabernet Franc, and typically some Petite Syrah and some Syrah. So it's really been one of our most popular wines lately. It's kind of the wine that a lot of folks will have on a Wednesday night with pizza, or they can take it to a steakhouse and it'll stand up to a ribeye steak as well. So it's kind of one of those wines that is just really a fun wine, and everybody's just been really enjoying it.
Are these hand dipped?
They are. Yeah, so those are all hand dipped. Actually, first off, the bottle itself, we had a custom mold made. So we're the only ones that have that bottle. And just to give it a little bit of a different appearance, something fun. I mean, my dad was saying with a name like Cellar Scraps and it being a fun red blend, he's like, we can't put it in a regular bottle. He said, let's have fun with it. Let's make people guess. So if you're looking at it from a distance, you don't know if it's wine, if it's brandy. When you receive a bottle of wine, your antennas always go up, and it's, oh, what varietal is this? What vintage is this? What is it in general? And by looking at the packaging, you really don't know any of that. So when you taste it, it's really fun, because then it's like, oh wow, this is a Cabernet red blend that.
Okay, so we're gonna taste it. Do you have any there to taste?
I can. I'm gonna go grab some. Bear with me one second. We talked about the waxing and hand dipping. So the best way, a lot of folks have trouble opening these. You just take the top regular waiter's corkscrew, and you just kind of poke it in a little bit, and it'll start screwing in just like this. And then you can just go through just like this. And sometimes you have to muscle it a little bit. And sometimes if the wax is too cold, it'll chip a little bit or something like that. But most of the time it turns out pretty clean. Like I said, we're the home of the Patriotic pour. So we have our American flags and then our Sherwin on the other side. Yeah, so this is our Cellar Scraps number 15. It is predominantly Cabernet. There's about, I'd have to look in my book to get them exact, but this blend here is about 75% Cabernet Sauvignon, and there's about 10% Syrah, and then the rest is a split between Cab Franc and Merlot, which on that split's pretty even. So some of the profiles that you're getting from this blend is the Syrah, which is kind of brings in some of those deeper leather type of notes. But love how the fruit of the Cabernet and everything shines through.
Yeah, the fruit's wonderful. So what year would this have been bottled?
So this is our Cellar Scraps number 15, which is the 15th edition that we have produced. And vintage-wise, it's predominantly 2018. So there is just a tiny bit of 2017 in here. So when I said typically we have two different vintages, mostly there is two different vintages, where the Cellar Scraps number 15, we were heavier on 2018. I would say it's probably an 80-20 split. So about 80% 2018 and about 20% 2017. When we started it, I was obviously around, during the Cellar Scraps coming about. However, I wasn't really involved in the naming or the branding or anything of such. And at that time, out of the wines that you have behind you there, the only wine we had was our estate Cabernet. And that was the one wine that we produced, and we produced nothing else. And so my dad was thinking, you know what? It'd be fun to have another blend that we can just kind of put everything that we don't want in our estate. Because when you're making your reserve and estate blends, you're not using everything. It's very, very unlikely that you can just throw everything that you have in the cellar together and have it come up as a great wine. Where you really start splitting the difference and finding these differences to make the wine exceptional is within that final kind of blending or fine tuning of these blends. And so you might have 5, 6, 7, 10, 15 barrels left over, and it's all good stuff. It just didn't make it into your primary blend. And so he thought, wow, this is great wine. We don't want to get rid of it or anything. So he said, let's just throw it all together and call it table scraps or something. And then the next thing you know, it turned into Cellar Scraps.
So did this go in oak barrels?
So from as far as our winemaking goes, all of our winemaking process is essentially the same that we do for our estate and our reserve cab. We age it in 100% French oak barrels. And I would say for our Cellar Scraps, we're about 40 to 50% new French oak. And so for our estate and reserve cabs, they're 70-ish% to 100% new French oak. So the Cellar Scraps does see quite a bit of new French oak in the scheme of winemaking world. However, a little slightly less than our reserve and estate cab.
What does that signify?
Kind of a funny story. There in the winery, we had some of these little, and I think the more technical term for them is harlequins. And so my folks, when they were designing the winery, they went to one of these shows where you can buy furniture and like home decor type of shows. And there was a woman there who had these handmade harlequins, and each one of them was different. So my mom loved them. And so they carried on throughout the show. My dad snuck a card from the lady and called her like a couple months later and ended up buying one for my mom for Christmas. And so she gets it at Christmas and she loves it. But she was like, this thing's kind of creepy too. I don't really want it in the house. So she said, Steve, take it to the winery. And next thing you know, my dad is like in love with these things and he buys like 3 or 4 more. And so we had them kind of stacked all around the winery. And then when Cellar Scraps, because for the first couple of vintages of Cellar Scraps, it didn't have the jester on there. It had another little figurine that we had in the winery on there as a label. And so he decided, hey, let's throw the jester on there. It's kind of a fun and funky swing to the winery. And so it became our Cellar Scraps logo, if you will.
Yeah, it's good. I like it.
That's good.
So what do we want to try next?
Let's hop into the estate Cabernet. The estate Cabernet. This is
Beautiful label.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that's been, we've made some subtle changes since the beginning, just in paper material and so on and so forth. But it's basically the same label that we designed in 1996. I remember my parents on the kitchen counter cutting things out and sticking them on bottles, and we still have some of the original mock-ups that when we were in the kind of design stage of the label. But that's what we ended up with, and has been known, as far as our estate cab to be, our flagship wine. Our American flag bottles that I was talking about earlier, that's what we fill the American flag bottles with, is our estate Cabernet.
Did I read that those bottles also have Swarovski's crystals embedded into some of the carving?
We do on some of the large format bottles. We make about 2 every year where we place Swarovski crystals in there, and we called it our jeweled edition. And so we only make a couple of them per year, and that's they're really, really a cool bottle. We actually send them to New York, and they have the crystals inlaid in the etching. But yeah, our estate Cabernet is like I said, 100% from the property, and we ferment all of our different vineyard blocks in basically separate lots. So as we're making our blend, we can pick different lots from each area of our property. Our property has about a 300-foot elevation change within it, 200 to 300, I'd say. And so we have some areas that are very, very rocky. We have some areas of our vineyards that are a little bit more shaded. We have areas of our vineyard that are fully exposed, southwest facing slopes. So up here on our property, we have a very different exposures on each different vineyard block. So that's why we ferment them separately and keep them separate until we go on to our final blending stage. And so our estate and reserve cabs get our best lots on the property. And so for aging wise, our estate cab is aged in 100% French oak, and typically our final blend ends up being about 70 to 75% new French oak, and we age it for 24 months. So it is in barrel for 2 years, and then we age it in bottle for about 1 year to 2 years before we release it. So we really
okay. So your estate is aged that long.
Mm-hmm.
And then the reserve, what makes the reserve special is it's aged even longer.
Yes. So for the reserve cab, it's a refined blend. So we go through basically all of our favorite barrels, and we pick out the best 6 to 8 barrels out of all of them. And it's on 100% new French oak, and we age them for an additional 6 or so months. So they see about 30 months on 100% new French oak, and the blend is also 100% Cabernet Sauvignon. That way you really get the full effect of 100% Cabernet Sauvignon from Sherwin on Spring Mountain. You'll find the reserve cab to be a little bit more structure driven, and a little bit more of like I said earlier, the cab lover's cab, where the estate Cabernet is kind of built to please, a little bit easier drinker, more of a crowd pleaser, if you will.
Oh yeah, this crowd is pleased. I mean, we're very, very happy with the estate. This is very drinkable.
Thank you.
Very nice.
Yeah, the best part about the estate cab as well is when you get a chance to come up here and visit us, to have a glass of estate Cabernet and look over the property. That's just, to me, that's killer, because it's all in the fruit to me. I say it's like the 80-20 rule. There's always, that winemaker that's famous for this or that or so on and so forth, where I feel like if you start with a good product, you'll end with a good product. And it's all the fruit. It really is. We just try not to mess it up when we get it in our hands. So.
Boy, if I had to choose between Cellar Scraps and this estate cab, I don't know how I'd make a choice.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you, what's your favorite wine? Do you have a favorite?
Gosh, it's tough to say. Kind of in the words of my dad, because I don't have children, but he always says it's like asking which is your favorite kid. It's like all of them are different for different reasons, and so I find myself drinking our estate cab the most. Kind of like I mentioned earlier, just casual nights, Cellar Scraps. The estate cab is, a little bit more of like, hey, let's drink wine a little bit more seriously tonight. Maybe some heavier meats. And then our reserve cab is I typically save that for special occasions, for a couple of reasons. And the main reason being we make so little of it.
So this is made entirely from your 16-acre vineyard on the top of the mountain.
That's right. Yeah, our estate cab, that blend there has a little bit of Cab Franc and Merlot blended in as well. Very small amounts, but we'll always blend a little bit of Cab Franc and Merlot into our estate cab. I think that kind of helps take that Cabernet edge off. The little bit of Merlot kind of softens a bit, and then the Cab Franc, it adds a little bit of different complexities into the wine as well. So.
And this wine stores well in cellars.
Yes. Yeah. So typically I like our wines anywhere from 5 to 10 years from the vintage date. That's why we age them a little bit longer. So they'll be about 4 years when our customers receive them. But they'll age every vintage is different, but we've been drinking some older wines that have just been tasting incredible. So very age worthy.
We get to try the reserve?
Yeah, I'll hop in the reserve. Now there's no more messing around. We have to.
Okay, now we're getting serious.
Now we're getting serious. The reserve, again, being aged for 30 months on 100% new French oak, you'll have a little bit more oak influence. I do feel that it adds some body to the wine. And also, the reserve cab, having a lot of structure and backbone, that extra age on the French oak helps integrate those tannins. In the beginning, when we didn't have, my folks were thinking, okay, should we do foils or should we do wax or this or that? And they started looking into the foils, and to make custom foils with our brand on them and everything, at that time, you had to buy like 5 years supply worth of the foils. And they thought, hey, we're just getting going right now. We're only making 150 cases. We don't need, 50,000 foils. And so they thought, well, let's wax them. That way we get to check the labels, make sure they're straight. We'll hand dip them. It'll be a nice touch and it looks great. So we'll do that. And then they picked red simply because of the fact that when it's sitting on the dinner table in a restaurant or wherever, the red sticks out. So they kind of thought, well, let's do red because it's more attractive to the eye. And then we got more or less branded as like the red top. So at that time, if I remember right, it was only like Dunn Family Vineyards and us that were doing the red wax. And so we were kind of branded as that. So there wasn't any going back from there. And then, so we did that, and fast forward 20 years later, almost 25 years later now, we're waxing all of our bottles. So it was then it was like, okay, we wax this one. So now we kind of have to wax this one. And then, the Cellar Scraps, it looks cool with the different grip going on. So we'll hand wax those. And now we probably wax 30,000 bottles by hand a year.
Yeah, this Reserve has a nice bold flavor.
Thank you. Yeah, we're really excited about all the wines that we have right now. Fortunately, all the wines that you have, and then also another vintage on top of that, was in our warehouse during the fires. So all of the wines are still available. Of course, we'll have a 2 year time where we won't have any reserve or estate cab. So that'll be 2019 vintage and 2020 vintage. Yeah, because we lost all the crop from the smoke. Right. And then the 2019, all of that was still aging in barrel. So it's bad, but we did luck out because we bottled our 2018 like 3 weeks before the fire, and we shipped it down to our warehouse 2 weeks before the fire. So had we had left it in the cellar, we would have lost 3 vintages. And so we're fortunate for that. But yeah, it's going to be a weird time to have 2 years of no estate wine, because it's our staple. We don't have a hole in our 25-year history, and you work on the wines you work in the vineyard for a whole year to try and get that crop ready to pick. That was lost. And then the other wine you've been working on in the vineyard plus, or for a season, plus in the cellar for a year, and then to have that perish. So it's
I think a lot of people wouldn't be able to come back from that. I mean, I think the fact that you and your family are building back and looking for the future, I think that's really admirable.
Yeah, my dad is just saying that's his main driver and focus, and really all of our main driver and focus right now is just to get back in business, to rebuild, to continue on. And there's we're working on the buildings and everything right now, which is a feat in itself. But then after that, we're going to have a couple year period that's going to be a little bit grim. Pretty much the largest portion of our business is our wine club. How our wine sales work in general is we're about 95% direct to consumer. So you'll hardly ever see us in a wine store or at a restaurant. You might see it a little bit here. And even if we sell it to a retailer, half the time it doesn't even hit the shelf, because they'll end up calling, somebody and just say, hey, I got this in, and then poof, it's gone. So, so typically most of our wine sales happen through us right here at the winery or through our wine club. And it's proven to kind of gotten to where that's one of the only ways to really get it is through our wine club in some cases. So we do it very, very basic. We send out our wine club one time per year. And for our most popular wine club, we call it our Cellar Scrapper Club, and based off of our Cellar Scraps. And that wine club has 4 cellar scraps in it and 2 of our estate cab. And so that ships out in October, typically right around fall. And that is kind of the base shipment for everybody. We do a reserve collection, which comes with 4 cellar scraps, 4 estate Cabernet, and 4 of our reserve Cabernet. That's kind of our highest end club. So that's a 1 case per year. That's also 1 shipment a year. And so those are our two wine clubs that we have. We also have a third one that's more of a collector's item, I would say, is 1 shipment per year in spring. And we call it our Premier Club. And that comes with one of our most current selections of estate Cabernet, our most current selection of our reserve Cabernet. And then we throw in our current selection of our commemorative etched American flag bottle. So it comes in a nice 3-pack with 1 bottle of each.
That'd be really nice, yeah.
Yeah, it's a great pack, and we have many customers that they get that every year so that they have a vertical of our American flag bottles, and then also have the estate cab and reserve cab as well. I host all the virtual tastings myself. Love to do it in the evenings and whatnot. It's great to send out wines to the customers and then enjoy some wines over Zoom. We do have a new kind of dynamic in how we're setting up our virtual wine tastings as well. Is typically we'll send out bottles of wine and then we can set up a virtual, but we do have mini bottles that we can send out now as well. So if you have a larger group of friends that want to do a group, or a corporate team or something like that, we can set up these little packs that are about, I think they're $65 each, that come with 3 to 4 wines in them, and then we can ship them out to everybody. Nice full restaurant pour, and you don't have to buy 3 whole bottles of wine to try and taste all those in a day or two. You don't want them to go bad. But so what we do is we pre-bottle them for you, and then we do them right before we ship them. That way there's no chance of oxidation or anything, and we'll typically do like 3-day shipping on it that way. And if it's hot out, of course, we'll ship them overnight, that way that they don't get hot. And it's really a fun way to do it.
It sounds like you've done some bigger groups then with your virtual tasting too.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've done, I've done larger virtual tastings that kind of turn into a little bit more of a webinar, if it's a large group, because, I've had groups that are like over 100 people on there. That'll be like to our wine club members and everything. So that's really fun. But then on kind of a smaller scale, in a meeting like we're doing right now, I've done 10 couples to, maybe 15 different couples on there. And that's great because it gives a little bit more chance for us to interact on like certain questions and whatnot. So yeah, we can really host on any level. I'd just love to see everybody in person up here again. And once we're back open, I'd love for you guys to come up and visit us. You can get updates online or through social media. We have Instagram and Facebook pages. We appreciate any hits on that as well. Help get the word out there about us. And after all of that, like I said, the most important thing is being able to sit down and share a glass of wine together. So please come up and see us. And what you guys do is, I was looking at some of your other videos. It's awesome. We just appreciate you reaching out to us.